Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to another evening of Learning Islam with Masjid As-Sabur, Sacramento. With me this evening is Sister Nailah. We're going to be discussing how to improve the welfare of our children. And I wanted to make sure we covered this subject because one of the important aspects of our Holy Quran is support for those in need, especially the children. And I wanted to also make sure that you know we are located at 4920 15th Avenue, Sacramento, California. We always begin with the greetings of peace, Assalamu alaikum, and we always state openly that we bear witness that there is no God but God and that Muhammad is his messenger. In Arabic, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasulullah. And then the greetings of peace, Assalamu alaikum. Peace and blessings be on you. Now, as we get started, one of the things that we are seeing in this world is an increase in basically children being abused. I think that's a simple word for it. And one of the things we wanted to address it from is from the Quranic perspective. And from the Quranic perspective, we wanted to read from Surah 2, Ayat 220. And when we look at Surah 2, Ayat 220, we always begin, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. I seek refuge with God from the rejected enemy. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, with the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. On this world and on the life to come, and they will ask thee about how to deal with the orphan. Say to improve their condition is best. And if you share their life, remember that they are your brethren, for God distinguishes between him who spoils things and him who improves. And had God so willed, he would indeed have imposed on you hardships which you would not have been able to bear. But behold, God is almighty, wise. Now, I like to begin with this because it points out that in treating the orphan fairly, we are preparing a better life for ourselves in God's eyes. And I think that's critical. And Sister Nailah has been involved in foster care and the care of orphans and others for, I'm not even going to say how long because she looks like a teenager. But it's been a long time.
Yes, very long time.
Now, how did you initially get involved with that?
I actually initially got involved with the child welfare system as a high school student, and I worked in a group home with children who were in the foster care system, but had really had so many challenges and behavior in terms of behavior, in terms of emotional issues and things like that, that they had to be placed in a group home. And a group home is a more restrictive setting for foster youth. Their staff, their therapists, and various type of support services that are located within the facility. Foster care is different in that the children actually reside in the homes of individual families. And so I got involved as a high school student, and then I went to college and studied clinical psychology, which was something that was a great interest to me because we had clinical psychologists working with the children in the group home, and I really wanted to know how I could better help and be a part of making the lives of the children better. And so I knew I wanted to work with children. I knew I wanted to work with children who were struggling in the foster care system. So that's kind of how I got involved with that.
In the foster care system, Where are most of the children? Group homes or foster homes or where?
The majority of the children are in foster homes, individual foster homes. Like in Sacramento County, there's probably over 200, probably closer to 400 children in the foster care system. That's Sacramento County. Also, there are what we call shelter care. So there's like receiving homes, and there's crisis nurseries. There are the group homes, like I mentioned earlier, and then there's the and they're not really foster systems, but there's mental health type settings for youth as well.
Now, the rescue care, what is that for?
Like crisis nurseries?
Yes.
Crisis nurseries is actually a program for children under the age of 5, and it really is for it's two uses. One is to prevent children from entering the system, and so when a woman or a man is in crisis and they have children that fit that age range, they can utilize the crisis nurseries free of charge and without any involvement with the child welfare system. But the child welfare system also uses those nurseries when they're needing to place a child temporarily or briefly. Sometimes it's not, when children come into the system, it's really brief, and it's just an opportunity for a parent to get their medication adjusted, or to move into a different place, or something like that. And so crisis nurseries generally have a 30-day maximum stay that the children would be there.
Now, when we talk about foster care, are the parents no longer involved when a child goes into foster care?
Actually, it varies. It varies. Most often, the parents are involved, but when a child comes into the system, generally what's happening is that there is an effort being made to reunify the child with the parents, and so the parents are going through a plan of action which is designed to get their lives together, and it's designed to help them to rehabilitate, because many, I would say as many as 80%, but probably more than that, of the families who lose their children to the child welfare system do so due to substance abuse issues. At least 80%, but probably more than that. The children may come into the system due to neglect, abandonment, abuse, physical, sexual, but the underlying factor is oftentimes substance abuse on the part of the parents.
Whew. Now, you've been involved with this for many, many years. Is it getting better or is it getting worse?
That's a good question. I would say this the system is getting better. I don't think that the issues that bring children into the child welfare system are necessarily getting better. Actually, I would imagine that they're getting worse. And a lot of the reason for that is probably, say, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, the reason why children were coming into the system were a little bit different. Now, like I said, at least 80% of them has something to do with substance abuse. And the rehabilitation rate with the types of drugs that are bringing children into the system, they're not great. They're not great. And so, and it's not just drugs; it's alcohol, mental health issues bring children into the system. But it just, we just see a lot of substance abuse.
How, well, are the children sometimes also the victims of substance abuse themselves?
It's not often, but it's not uncommon for a child in their adolescence to have experimented. But it's probably not terribly much higher than in the general population. But the younger children, I would say no. Most of those children have not been exposed themselves to the use of substances.
Now, I know that you really advocate for foster care. Do foster parents undergo any sort of specialized training or preparation?
Oh, yeah, definitely. So I'm on the board of directors of our Children's Keeper Child and Family Services, which operates a foster care program. And so the process, and pretty much every private foster care agency operates the same way, but and there's state regulations that kind of outline how we're to operate. But when someone inquires about becoming a foster parent, the screening process begins then. We ask for basic information initially, but as they go through the process, there are interviews, there are orientations, there are trainings, there are what we call home studies, which is an in-depth interview where we really get to know the family, or the individual. We really get an opportunity to find out what their strengths are, so that when we're placing children, we have a good idea of what the family's strengths are versus the child's needs, so we can make a good match. And so there's a lot of information, and criminal record clearances, and things like that. There's a lot of information that before they can be foster parents.
About how long does it take for that process to be completed?
It really depends. I was a foster parent at one point, and my child is 25 now, and I got her when she was 12. It took me a year to become a foster parent, and that's because although I knew that I wanted to be a foster parent, it's a huge commitment, and it's a commitment that you don't want to take lightly, because it's a child's life, and and like I said, my kid's 25, and so she came to live with me, and that was her last foster home, and that's ideally what we want. And so if it takes a year, that's okay. But for some people, they're really motivated and they're really determined, and they'll get through that process in 6 weeks. These are people who have already been criminal record cleared. They already have their CPR and first aid. They probably had a physical recently, and then they're ready to take the training at the next opportunity. That's a rare occasion. An average, I would say, is about 4 months, 3 to 4 months.
Wait a minute. You mentioned CPR and a physical.
Oh, yes.
And
yes.
What else?
Well, those are some of the main things. CPR, first aid is something that we require. We require, obviously, that they participate in 12 hours worth of training. We require that they get a TB test, like I said, health screening. We want their DMV printout. We want to know how safe of a driver they are. We want references from people who know them, and if they've parented before, we want people who know their parenting style. It's really a comprehensive packet, and they have a whole application that they fill out in terms of letting us know who they are and what they're about and their motivation.
Okay, so when I read about these instances of foster parents that abuse their charges, those are the rarities?
Absolutely, absolutely. I've been working within foster care agencies probably, I want to say 15 years, since 98. I've been working in this capacity, like I said before, I worked in group homes. I would have to say I've come across 2, maybe 3 in all that time that did things that were abusive to the children. Now, foster parents are human, so they do things wrong all the time. That's very different from when I was a foster parent. I did things that were wrong, and by wrong I mean I make a mistake. But abusing a child, neglecting a child is something entirely different. And so I've come across that maybe 2, 3 times, and that's why we're in the home as an agency. We're in the home, we're checking on the child weekly or every other week, having support for the foster parent to prevent anything negative from happening. But most foster parents are good people. They're good people. I've had an opportunity to see it from both sides, and foster parenting is hard work. It's hard work, and it's one of those things that you really have to enjoy doing and consider important work in order to do it for any length of time.
Now, do most foster families have their own kids as well, or do you find that most foster parents don't have their own children?
Many foster parents have their own children. Foster parents can be single, married, retired, and so it really depends on the family. We have families who have no children and never had children, and we have people who are have raised their children, they're out of the house, and then we have people who have children of the same age or a little older or a little younger that are foster parenting.
Is there any particular model that you found is most successful, or are they all about the same?
In terms of the composition of the family,
Yeah.
they're all the same. It just depends on the individuals themselves. One thing that we have found, though, that really seems to make a difference with regards to their success in foster parenting is people who have a spiritual connection, people who have a connection to a religious or spiritual community, and through that community or their belief system, they believe that it's their job or their obligation, responsibility to give back and to take care of the children, like you were alluding to earlier, with regard to what Allah says in the Quran about the orphan.
So that spiritual connection is really a sort of a determinant of success, would you say?
It is, in that if you do it for the wrong reason, if you foster parent for the wrong reason, and so for example, a wrong reason might be because you want to feel better about yourself, that can be disastrous, because foster parenting, like parenting, is hard work, and a lot of times you don't see the benefit. You put all your work in, and you don't see the benefit until years down the road. When you're parenting somebody else's child, that's an even more unique situation, because you don't have the blood ties, you don't have the history, and so it's a different situation altogether. So if you are reliant on a good, warm, fuzzy feeling to motivate you and to get you through those difficult times, then that's a recipe for failure. But if you're reliant on your sense of obligation, duty, and a heart for taking care of those that can't take care of themselves, then even during those hard times, you lean on that as opposed to that warm and fuzzy feeling. And there are warm and fuzzy feelings. You just can't rely on those because they're not always there.
Reminds me of my own childhood. My father's favorite phrase, "Boy, I brought you into this world and I can take you out." I think that's an example of bad parenting, isn't it?
Well, it's absolutely against the foster parenting rules.
Okay.
We prohibit taking your child out. No, we prohibit any type of corporal punishment.
Okay.
And so, obviously, children that have been through trauma and neglect and abuse, we don't want them to experience anything that looks like that. But parents do the best that they can. That's what I would say. Parents do the best that they know how.
Now, you had mentioned when we were talking previously about was it rescue care?
Crisis
Care.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that sometimes foster parents have to make use of, because they're going through something?
No, not usually. Usually, if a child is in foster care and there's a crisis with the foster parent, we use what we call respite care. And respite care is typically, it could be either one. It's typically another foster parent who's been trained and who has the same qualification as the foster parent. But it could also be a friend or family member that the foster parent has vetted and have a confidence that they are good and a good provider of care for their child. For temporarily, they can use someone like that temporarily, briefly, no more than 24 hours. But if it's a situation where there's a crisis that requires their attention, we would find a respite home for that child.
In other words, if it's more than a 24-hour situation.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
It's interesting because sometimes parents need timeouts too.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you have a 25-year-old foster child, right? How's your foster child doing?
Well, I took guardianship of her. So
Yes.
I don't really call her my foster child. I call her my kid. She's my kid. I was too young to be her mother. So I'm auntie to her. And the rest of my family is her family. And so she's doing great, actually. She was in the Air Force for a while. She did 4 years in the Air Force. And she's currently working in Afghanistan as a civilian. But she does basically what she's doing is she's working to make a lot of money. So she does.
That's a good reason.
I mean, that's what the job she's doing is not necessarily in her field that she was studying in college, but she can make a lot of money because of the risk. And so since she was in the Air Force anyway, and she's connected with that world, she's working over there at least for the next year or so. She did it right out of high school. Actually, she did it when she was about I want to say 19. She did it before she went into the Air Force, and she made quite a bit of money doing that. And so she's a very well-adjusted, healthy young woman.
Does it scare you to have her there?
You know what? It doesn't scare me to have her there. It scared me when she was deployed. It was a little nerve-wracking. She wasn't deployed the entire 4 years, but right before she got out of the Air Force, she was deployed. That made me nervous. But her being there in the capacity that she's there now, it's not nearly as concerning as her being there on deployment.
Now, would you say that she is a well-adjusted young woman?
I would say that she is very responsible. You know, she has always been very financially responsible in terms of getting her education. She's been pursuing that. Of course, she was full-time Air Force, so she hasn't completed that. But she's financially responsible. She's socially responsible. No nicks with the law or anything like that. She's a good girl. I mean, she struggles. She struggles and becoming who she is to be, and I think that's just part of life. But as far as the overall picture, she's a well-adjusted young lady.
So, Auntie
Nai, that's who I am to her and all my other nieces and nephews. Yeah.
Now, does she think of you as more of her mother than her auntie, or how does she think of you?
I think she sees me more as an auntie mom, because her mother was still alive. She's since passed away. She was still alive when she was placed with me, and she lived with a family for about 5 years before she was placed with me. And so she had another mother, and so both of those women have since died, and so I'm the closest thing that she has to a mother that's living, and so I think she sees me as an auntie mom.
Now, I gotta ask you, because you have the experience, as a foster mother, was it worth all of the effort?
Absolutely. Absolutely. If I had to do it all over again, I would absolutely do it again. I would do it differently. I would use my experience as a foster parent, not as a social worker, but my experience as a foster parent, and I would make different decisions. And I'm using some of what I learned with her with my stepdaughter, Brianna. And so, yeah, absolutely. If I had to do it all again, I would absolutely do it again. I don't regret it. As a matter of fact, I think that it was as much of a benefit to her as it was to me.
Now, I think that's the key issue, is the act of assisting a child or assisting an orphan is really more of a benefit to the one who gives the assistance than to the one who receives the assistance. So we encourage all faith-based community members to look in their hearts to see if that might be something that they want to engage in. In the Muslim community, we sort of are insular, and we need to become a little bit more open to the opportunities to serve, because God did not limit any good to any one people. He made good available to all. And on that note, I want to thank you again for this wonderful interview.
Thank you for having me.
And next time, bring a picture of your daughter.
Oh, I will, yes.
And then that way we can, I'll bring out my granddaughter, you bring out your daughter, and we'll have a real family time right here. But as we close, I want to remind everyone, we're from Masjid As-Sabur, Sacramento, 4920, soon to be 4926, 15th Avenue, Sacramento, California, www.masjidassabur.org. Please come by and visit us, especially in our new facility. And you can even contribute if you want, but we're not emphasizing that. we want to make sure that you come by. We have Jummah prayer every Friday at 1:30 p.m. We also are available on the internet at www.masjidassabur.org. We want to remind you, Ramadan will be beginning this year in July. It will be in the first third of the month of July. So get ready. And inshallah, God willing, we will be located at 4926 15th Avenue for the month of Ramadan. So please come join us. Thank you for watching our show. Thank you for being a participant. And we encourage everyone, go out and do good. That's why God put us all on earth. Assalamu alaikum. May the peace and blessings of God be with you. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum.